John and I climbed down from the trap, feeling very subdued. We gazed up at the ramparts high above us. The place looked as if it had been abandoned under an enchanter's spell. I became conscious of the noise of the cicadas throbbing in the heat, and the smell of baked earth and pine needles. We walked cautiously to the edge of the moat, while my mother paid the driver. The entrance door was reached by a brick bridge that spanned the moat like a miniature viaduct. Although fixed, it was always known as the drawbridge. When my mother led us across, John and I clung to her, hardly daring to look down into the moat's scrub-concealed depths over 20 feet below. Looking up produced a similar sensation, for the square corner tower was nearly 60 feet high. We found ourselves in a dark, cell-like room with small square windows set deep in the thick walls. It was cool, almost cold after the heat outside. There was a damp smell of whitewash. As our eyes grew accustomed to the gloom, we saw that we were entering a tunnel with smooth walls, but a rough cave-like ceiling, which showed that it had been cut through solid rock. Up one side, a staircase ascended to the top of the tower. When we passed, our movement disturbed some of the bats, who emitted virtually inaudible squeaks of alarm. We saw daylight at the end of the corridor and came out into a courtyard not much wider than an alley and cobbled with round stones brought up from the riverbed. Even in the height of summer, it had a cool, mossy smell. We discovered that the L-shaped courtyard divided the living quarters from the cisterns and old dungeons. They lay behind the uneven stone wall on the left that seemed to reach to the sky. As soon as we crossed and entered the door to the hall, the frightening impression of the castle's exterior vanished. The hall, with the double doors of the portone open onto the terrace, was flooded with sunlight. John and I ran from room to room, our voices and footsteps echoing under the high vaulted ceilings. Even the fireplaces carved from grey pietra serena reached far above our heads. I felt as if I had shrunk, like Alice. My mother pointed out a shield carved into the stone. It depicted a lion rampant, looking understandably anguished in a thicket of thorns. This apparently was the coat of arms of the Malaspinas, the family that had ruled these valleys since the 11th century. The embrasures leading to the French windows showed the 16-foot width of the walls. We went out onto the balcony to look down at the town. A train was emerging from the tunnel on the far side of the valley. We began to count the carriages as it crossed the bridge over the river. It seemed endless. "We're going upstairs to see the garden now," said my mother. We followed her. The idea of a garden high above our heads diverted our attention from the number of carriages. She led the way up a dark, perilous staircase at the end of the courtyard. We kept close to the wall. As we emerged again into the daylight, we saw vines above us on a pergola. John and I immediately ran off to explore, ignoring her cries to be careful. We peered through some trellis down into the narrow courtyard from which we had just come. It was indeed a long way down. Then we rushed from tower to tower, where we gazed at the valleys far below with astonishment and delight. We also raced round the sentry's walk. This followed the outside edge of the terracotta-tiled roof over the living quarters. But our greatest delight was my father's garden in the sky. At the centre stood a fantastic rose-covered tempietto of white trellis work with a dome in the middle and a pinnacle on either side. My father's design must have been inspired by the Brighton Pavilion. As a backdrop, it had the most extraordinary aspect of all. An avenue of mature ilex trees extending between the two towers. Underneath the dome was a sunken marble vasca, 6 foot square and 5 feet deep, which formed a pool with water lilies and goldfish. And from this focal point, a broad grass walk advanced with flower beds on each side, edged by miniature box hedges straight towards the greatest view of all, the 4 main peaks of the Carrara Mountains, or Apuan Alps, as they are officially known. We were still too young.